Hi, I'm Sandy Zuniga, the founder of Colorado Springs Town Tidings. Be in the know on the go for all things Colorado Springs, delivered right to your inbox. Today, in our local business spotlight, we're exploring a unique service that many find intriguing: the world of spiritual guidance and intuitive counseling. My guest, Laurel Phoenix of Crystal Vision, brings 5 decades of experience as what she calls a conscious channel, offering guidance and clarity to those seeking it. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or just simply curious, we invite you to listen with an open mind as we learn about this local business owner's journey and the service she provides to our local community. Laurel, I'm so glad to have you. Your work is described in many ways: psychic, medium, spiritual guide. For my listeners who might be uncertain about this, how do you personally describe what you do?
Hi there, and thank you for having me on your show. How do I describe myself? Just because I was certified as a psychic by the American Association of Professional Psychics back in the early 90s, that's kind of the word that stuck with me.
Yep.
But honestly, they're all the same. You could call me a conduit. You could call me a medium. I heard someone locally say there's a difference between a psychic and a medium, that a psychic doesn't talk to the other side, but a medium does. That's not true. I started using the word medium here because of that person saying it, but really, it's semantics. You know,
Ah,
I like the word psychic because it's just what's been in my vernacular my whole life because I grew up in this world.
okay, that sounds approachable. So, in the introduction, I mentioned you practice as a conscious channel. That's a fascinating term to me. Can you walk us through what that actually means and what that experience is like for you and also those that you use that with?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so to describe the difference, because a lot of people, we see psychics portrayed on TV, movies, as we go about at pop-up events, at Renaissance festivals. Most people, and I did when I was younger, use divination tools. It could be a crystal ball. It could be tarot cards or the word just went right out of my mouth. But tea leaves, palm reading. You could use tools. When I was younger, my first cards were actually called plain deck, which meant poker cards.
Okay.
I had two decks of poker cards. One was the red deck, which was the multi-purpose deck, and yeah, regular Hoyle playing cards. And the second deck was the blue deck, which was business and legal matters. Now, once you know how to read, you can really interchange the cards as you want. But most people, Oracle was the word I was trying to think of.
Okay.
But most people use tools to be able to access the other side. I call conscious channeling. Back when I was growing up in the 70s, I mentioned before I grew up in this world, my mother on the other side, may she rest in peace, was also a psychic reader and, like me, a hypnotherapist. Um, but she channeled actually those poker cards that I was reading from. But back then, if you followed people like Shirley MacLaine and whatnot, they would talk about going to trance channeling. People who would go into a meditation or a trance to be able to bring in the angels, guides, ascended masters, your helpers, those from the other side, but they'd have to do it in a meditative state. Over the years, I realized that I had the ability to get those answers without the divination tools, but without actually having to go into any kind of meditation or trance, hence being conscious,
Okay.
aware as the information is coming through. And why I would do it rather than, I'm going to use an example I recently used with someone else. When you go to a Japanese restaurant, they give you some miso soup and you use the spoon and you pull out the little pieces of tofu. And then you realize this is ridiculous. You put the spoon down and you drink the soup. You're no longer using the tool. Why use a tool to get the answers when I already have it all right there before me?
Okay.
Access to your loved ones, or the picture of what I'm being shown for the future or the past, or whatever it is you're inquiring about, or being able to talk to your loved ones on the other side. I'm here, I'm fully present, and I'm able to do that. Now, what you will see when you come to me for reading are crystals everywhere. My company is
Okay.
Crystal Vision. They are for me. They're not necessarily talking to me.
Right.
They are just my protection, my guidance, my traveling family, my friends. I started picking rocks up as a child long before we knew, in the 70s that they had magical powers, like
Right.
rose quartz is good for giving warm love. And so, for me, it's just a comfort for me to keep them with me. But I don't need them. I've walked up to strangers in the grocery store and just started giving them information because I was told to.
Right.
So, but that's to me what conscious channeling is. Do I still have the tools? Sure. I almost always have a pendulum on me, mostly for confirmation for my own self readings.
Okay.
But why waste someone's time too? When you go to get a reading, they start the timer, shuffle the deck, lay out the cards. To me, that's wasting a lot of their time. Why not just tune in?
Right. So you are multi-generational psychic, um, conscious channeling. At what age did you kind of feel like you were different than the other kids, or was it that because it was in your family already and second nature, was it that everybody else was different?
That's an excellent question, actually. I okay, so one of I don't know if they still have this, but when we were kids, we always had a parent in our classroom in elementary school.
Okay.
We had the parent helper, or the PTA member that came most days through whatever, through snacks or this or that.
Right.
And you're going to hear me say this a lot, may she rest in peace, because they're all on the other side of the veil already. But there was a class mom. Her name was Joe Feller. I met her when I was about 8 years old. And she was actually the one who said to me, what was coming out of my mouth was prophetic. Now, let me backtrack for 1 minute. My mom actually, after the fact, told me she knew from the time I was a toddler that I was a psychic child.
Ah,
But she also told me after the fact that she was jealous of my gifts because a lot of it was natural for me and a lot of it she needed to turn to the tools for.
oh, wow.
But Joe was the one who said, um, start doing readings. So I started doing readings outside the house when I was about 9.
Yep.
And I did that for about 5 years, working with them at psychic fairs and new age shops, as they were called back then, crystal
Right.
shops and things. And about 5 years later, when I was about 14, she said, you really should be charging for this now. So that's about how old I was when I started. Now I had already been working, doing other jobs, babysitter, mother's helper, things like that over the years. And at 14 and a half, I got my first real job as a hostess in a restaurant. But that's about how old I
Underage.
was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hostess, we weren't touching anything sharp, but walking distance to my house, or biking distance. But that's uh, as a kid. But did I feel different in that way? No, because my friends loved me as me,
Oh, good.
and we were gifted in different ways. They were all National Honor Society kids, and I wasn't. I didn't do bad. I got decent grades,
Yeah.
but surely not National Honor Society. But
Yep.
I could pick up the phone and call them, and they'd say, "How did you know I needed to talk to you?" Or I'd call and they'd say, "I was just about to call you." Or I'd walk in their house because back in the 70s, we'd just walk into each other's
Right.
houses, and I'd walk in, they're like, "We were just about to head to your place," and so it was just always. I was the friend that everybody came to for the advice and for the help and just like I was the mom for all of my kids' friends that
Right.
they all came to for help and advice and whatnot.
Right.
So,
Well, that's a much better and more positive story than I've heard in the past. A lot of uh, the mediums and others in that field, it was a tougher growing up because they were different and it wasn't in their family, or maybe but not directly. And so I'm so thrilled to hear that you had a different experience. And so when you started using your gifts, it wasn't a we can't hang out with Laurel. Our parents said no. It's you're already part of the fold, and you are who you are.
well, yes, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't all on sunshine and flowers, as
Unicorns
I.
and roses there.
It wasn't all sunshine and flowers. My mom, as I kind of threw in there and slid right past really fast, was not nice to me. We were in the same fields,
Right.
but and I didn't understand it because my mom was awesome. I'm going to talk about my mom for 5 seconds. She was brilliant and creative, and she wrote music without piano lessons, and could take Stella Doro cookies, which I know you know what those
I
are,
do.
and make them into wall hangings, butterflies. I see a Stella Dora cookie. I go, Stella Dora cookie, Italian cookies, yum. She would make them into butterflies and lobsters and wall hangings. And
Wow.
she was brilliant and creative. And I wanted to have 1/10 of her creativity. And yet, what I didn't know, and one of her students became one of my mentors later on in my teenage years. And she would say to me, "Your mom is jealous of you. Your mom is jealous of you." And I'd go, "But why? Why is she so mean to me?" And she never explained it. My mother apologized to me from the other side.
Oh, wow.
3 years after she crossed, she sent me an apology and said that from the time I was a toddler, she knew I was psychic. She did everything she could to hamper me because she was just jealous of my gifts. And now that she's on the other side and learning, she wanted to apologize for doing that to me because of, despite her, how I turned out and whatnot. But they knew actually when I was young, but they didn't make it easy.
Okay.
But the people around me,
Right.
my friends, my mother's father, see, my grandmother would never have used those words, but my grandmother's also, "Darling, I might know a thing or two. I've got a little bit of intuition." So it's actually very multi-generational. And my grandfather called it, common sense, but none of it was common, but it
Right.
always made sense. So, but he was my biggest familial supporter was my grandfather on my mother's side.
Oh,
He was
wow.
just completely encouraging.
Oh, nice. Yep. Well, as we've talked privately, you're going along with life, and then life just happens. And so we don't always choose what's happening to us, and although we have choices, we have what's put in front of us is whatever life puts in front, and then we work with it from there. So I'm encouraged that even if there are other children like you, that it doesn't always have to be a separation, and it
No,
and it could be an inclusion, and it doesn't always have to be you're different, and that's a bad thing. Even though in your own house it was a little challenging, and that's devastating as a child in general, because that's where we get what we look at ourselves for the rest of our lives. even. I mean, I do that too. There are certain things that happen with me, and when I look in the mirror, at this age, I am where I am, but I'm still seeing that little girl and what had happened there because that's what, I was growing up with. So I'm glad to know that you had a mixture, at least. It wasn't all
Oh,
one or
yes.
the other. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
that also gives you more strength as you're growing up, especially when you can look back now and know, okay, maybe those were the lessons I needed to learn. They're not easy when you're going through them, but as we get older, it's like, okay, yep, got it. Now I can move on.
Well, sure. And most certainly, it definitely gave me a way to work through imposter syndrome, which is the one thing that most of us are battling with. Are we good enough? Or can we do it this way? Are we were trained in this, but am I good enough to actually accomplish it?
Right.
The biggest thing that the combatant side of my mom gave me was the ability to, because she would say to me, if my pendulum swung a different way, she'd say I was doing it wrong. No, I wasn't doing it wrong. It was just wrong for, not her way. It was my way. And my guides act different. But I do want to touch on something you said a second ago, simply about we wouldn't choose it. Metaphysically, spiritually speaking, I actually don't necessarily agree with that.
Okay.
And I've been through, which from our private talk, I've been through a lot of traumatic experiences,
Yeah.
but I firmly believe that on a spiritual level, we agreed with our partner, whether that partner is our spouse, our friend, our higher self, our child, that we're going to go through these tests together before we're even born. People like to say I didn't choose my parents, metaphysically speaking, and having also doing past life regressions and hypnotherapy and Reiki and things like that. That's not true. We actually do choose our parents, and our parents choose us, so that we can work through either karmic lessons from the past, or pains that we have to experience in this lifetime that we decided, pardon me, that we were going to do. And so it doesn't always feel like a choice. And most certainly, you still live through the pain, whether it was a conscious or a subconscious or pre-conscious choice, prenatal choice. But I do believe that on some levels we do agree that we're going to go through these experiences together.
Wow. That's really interesting. And I love the dialogue. I always say difference of opinion is not the problem, the lack of respect is. So I love hearing different perspectives and a way of looking at something differently than I have. That doesn't mean that somebody will change my mind or others, but I love taking in what's coming from your mindset, your angle, and taking it into consideration. I think we grow as a society, as a community, when we do that. So I so appreciate, Laurel, you uh, taking the time to stop and give me your perspective on that. That was
Well,
very
thank
interesting.
well, thank you. And I, as I like to say, your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open.
Right.
um, Having traveled through many different spiritual and religious experiences and cultures and studies. I'm also an ordained interfaith minister. And so going through all of them, whether it was as a born again Christian back in the day, or as a Hindi studying Siddha Yoga, or the fact that I've gone to a Native American sweat lodge off and on since 1994, every one of those gives me new knowledge, new understanding, new perspective. And I'm grateful that I've followed that path as it was presented to me, so that I can get a more well-rounded vision and experience and understanding of spiritual um, experiences, spiritual life, knowledge,
Beliefs,
wisdom.
beliefs.
Beliefs, yes, exactly. I've also moved all over the country and I've lived in different cultures in Arizona and Texas and Orlando and the Northeast and Colorado. And every place I go, it too is another chance for me to absorb what's going on around me and whether it's spiritual, political, religious, and spiritual and religious are not equal. Metaphysical, seeing beyond, meta means beyond, seeing beyond what we could see with our eyes. There's so much more out there. And every one of these places have been another chance, another experience, another opportunity for me to expand that mind that I hope is always open.
Right. Yep, I agree. And you definitely have taken in a lot. So many people see a conflict between traditional faith and this kind of spiritual work. Yet it's clear your practice comes from a place of deep spirituality, as we talked about. So I'm curious to know, how do you see the relationship between your gifts and a higher power?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story.
Okay.
I was born a nice Jewish girl in Brooklyn, was
Okay.
moved to Jersey when we were kids. When my parents broke half the Ten Commandments after my bat mitzvah at 13, that sent me spinning because I was taught this is the way you live. This is
Right.
it. There is no other. And when they coveted their neighbor's wife, blah, 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 I ended up in church for a lot of years. I was at Assemblies of God, and then I was baptized United Methodist at Washington Crossing United Methodist Church, right in the Delaware River where Washington crossed.
Wow.
But my first pastor told me what I was doing was a sin, and
Yep.
he started quoting from the Old Testament, and so I stopped doing it for a while because that's what he told me, and I listened to him. Then fast forward to not enjoying their teachings anymore and them, well, they made a whole lot of assumptions about me and my cousin. None of them were accurate.
Okay.
And we found that out after her having attended for quite a while. So that's when we started going to Norman Levy, Washington Crossings Methodist Church. I was at this point already on my way to becoming a single mom. And in the apartment above me was another single mom with two kids. And I'm mentioning color simply because it adds to the understanding. She was white with two boys that were half black.
Okay.
One of them, Cole, was special needs, and he was dating another girl, all white, special needs, Brenda. And something was wrong with Brenda. And we could all tell, but we couldn't tell what because they were, and we didn't use the term special needs back then. Back then,
Okay.
you used an inappropriate word.
Right.
But she was more on the spectrum than Cole was.
Okay.
And I didn't know what to do. So I went to meet with my pastor. I said, I need help. And, they all knew each other, the pastors, they're all very familiar with each other. And I had been going here for quite a while already. I had already gone to see Billy Graham and, attend things with this pastor. He knew me, he knew my husband. We went there for marital counseling. This was someone who knew us.
Right.
And I said, Brenda needs help. What do I do? And I said, I know I could figure it out. I know I could get the answers, but Art told me I'm not allowed to use these gifts. And that's when he said, first of all, if you really believe in Jesus, that Jesus came and his sacrifice meant something, then you know that the law of the Old Testament is no longer, and that we're supposed to be paying attention to the New Testament. He said, and if that's the case, then you also have to pay attention to what the New Testament said. And he started talking about the gifts of the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
He started talking about the lessons in First Corinthians 12 and in Ephesians and in Romans, and talking about actually how important not the gift of prophecy is actually listed second. Um, later on in First Corinthians. And he started talking about, and we went over all the gifts of the Holy Spirit, whether it was the gift of being able to gift, and interpretation. And he said to me, he said, nowhere in the book does it say you only get one gift.
Huh.
And nowhere in the book does it say that these gifts ever end. Because the other thing I've been doing, which he actually had me start doing, long before I ever heard the term Reiki, he would call me and ask me to come to the church to lay hands
Right.
on people who were hurting. He had heard me speaking in tongues, and he knew who I was as a human, as a spiritual being, as a lover of all that's godly. And he asked me to lay hands on Mrs. Hicks. She was the first, on her knees. And after that, it became a habit. Please, Laura, can you come in and lay hands on so and so? And he said I had the gift of healing. So, if when you look at those spiritual gifts, whether it be healing, prophecy, interpretation, whether it's teaching, there is nowhere that it says that's the only gift you get. And there
Hmm.
nowhere does it say that they're only good at Jesus's period. And that has stayed with me, that lesson. I ended up doing a reading on Brendan. Back then it was cards. Back then I wasn't conscious channeling, but I pulled up my cards and I laid a spread, and it turned out that she was pregnant and she had no idea how she got pregnant.
Wow.
And so what he told me was that if you have a gift and you're not using it, that's the sin.
Huh. That is interesting. The the experience you had, because it is very polarized. It seems like it's the Bible says this and it's all or nothing. And again, you've giving us a different perspective, but it's not just a perspective that you just believe. You were in a church, you were talking to a priest and a pastor and all that. Um, and they gave you a different take on it from what others say from the book and all of that. So I love that you are able to articulate and give us your experience and that it actually happened. This isn't something you just made up or decided, I'm going to interpret it this way. You had those higher up in the churches seeing you differently and making it okay um instead of singling you out and shaming you.
Well, yeah, and when you think about it, though, when you think of all the gifts of the Holy Spirit, there's not just the gift of healing and the gift of faith and the gift of prophecy. There's also the gift of discerning the spirits. So, and I actually have gone into people's home and jokingly I use the word ghost bust because we all
Right,
understand that, but
right.
spiritually cleanse their homes. And there's the gift of tongues and interpretation and helping people, and the gift of faith. And the thing is, and I no longer call myself a born again Christian. If anything, I'm closer to an omniist after all my years in studies. I believe every religion has truth to it. It's up to us to figure out which truth for ourselves.
Right.
But the one thing I most certainly always have had is the gift of faith. And it is a gift because not everybody has it. But the one
Correct.
thing, and I say this jokingly, but I don't mean it as a joke. My ancestor cousin Jesus said, what I have done, you could do also. That's what he said.
Right.
Everything I have done, you could do also. And he exhorted us to go out and do it. He didn't just say, you could do it and now sit at home on your ass, pardon me. He, he said, go do it. And I like to jokingly say, I have done a lot of what my cousin has done, except turn water to wine or walk on water, but I do float on water
Right.
without having to move my hands and feet. But I actually believe him. I took him at his word. That's what faith really is taking this knowledge and this wisdom that is also talked about in other religions, from Hinduism and Buddhism, and uh, they're all at them ahead at the moment.
Right.
But these lessons, Judaism
Right.
in the Kabbalah, and all of these spiritual paths and religious paths have their own version of being able to have to tune in, learn, and utilize it. Some people try and twist it and make it negative. I believe actually the word, which is what he said, which is everything I've done you could do. And these are the gifts, and go and use these gifts. And I believe my pastor, I was, let's see, I'm calculating in my head how old I was when this happened with Brenda. Uh, Gave birth in 24, so I was about 25 actually when I had this lesson. And I'm 57 now. But he said it would be a sin if you do not use it. And I actually believe him because I was able to get her help. She was actually put out by her parents because of who Cole was. So his mom ended up having to take her in. But if we didn't know that, can you imagine what 9 months would have been like? And at 9 months, what would have happened if
Right.
I didn't do what I could do and find a way to help this young girl?
Right.
I can't even, it blows my mind to think of her giving birth without even knowing what was going on with her body.
Right. Right.
And so I agree. I believe Pastor Norman Levy, that was his name, Norman J. Levy. He, last I heard, was still in Philadelphia, but he really transformed the way I think in a lot of things spiritually and religiously because he actually understood what they meant and he
Right.
spoke the language. So
Right.
I'm grateful for these gifts. I'm very humbled by these gifts. And in true story, if I didn't need to pay rent,
Right.
I'd be like Oprah standing on the corner going, you get readings and you
Right.
get Reiki and you get other reading. Oh, come here, let me help you. It whatnot. That's what I do for a
I
living.
totally can relate. I would be the same way. It just I just want to help people, and it's like okay, but there's still rent, mortgage, food.
Exactly.
It's got to be
But,
something. If we could
but
just do stuff on a barter system,
I do
I
that
think
too.
I'd be happier.
I actually do a lot of barter because, or trade. I was down at an event in Pueblo, and the woman knows I actually love crystal skulls. I'm actually wearing 4 crystal skulls. I love crystals, but I really love crystal skulls. Part of that is as a hypnotherapist. But this woman came over and she's like, I know you love skulls. She was a seller. And she brought me this gorgeous, beautiful, I have it over there, beautiful green skull not I'll think of what it is in a minute. Not I'll think of it. But she said, "Can
Emerald?
I?" No, no, it's not aventurine, but it's a darker, richer green. I can't think of what it is. Oh, you know what? I can't actually think of the stone
That's
off the
okay.
top of my head, but it's one of these
Okay. Yep.
but much bigger. Um, you'll have to excuse me. There's some head trauma there, so sometimes stones fall out and fall back in again, or they're moving. But the hole in my head. But she asked me if I would do the reading for her, for the skull.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Did I need that skull? No.
Right.
Apparently, you wanted to come live with me.
Right. Exactly.
I have never turned anybody away.
Right.
You
So
know,
let's talk about the people you help. Who are the typical clients that seek you out, and what kinds of challenges or questions are they bringing to you when they do?
Oh, wow, that's a phenomenal question, except for the fact that I can't stereotype them.
Right.
I am, I have, I don't, when I was younger, I would do readings for children. I no longer do. 16 is the youngest I will read for because children don't understand that this is a might could I'm not going to sound like my sister-in-law. It might happen. It could happen. No laughing at me. Uh, but it's a possibility, but not set in stone. That the
Right,
reason for getting information is if you don't like the information, you have the opportunity to change it and shift it. And children don't quite grasp that. They think if I tell them, yes, I think this is a good path for you, that's the path they need to go. So
right.
I no longer read for children, but I have actually read for the oldest I've read for is a 98-year-old.
Okay,
Uh, when I was younger, like I said, I read for younger. The younger I've read for here is 16 years old. The majority of people are older Gen Zers to late boomers.
okay.
Okay. And no offense intended to any of our generations.
No, no, no,
Uh,
no, no.
no offense intended because I don't want a boomer to say, oh my God, she called me a boomer. I say it lovingly. I miss my grandparents. Okay, I'm very proudly Gen X, and
Me too.
earned every weird thing used to describe us.
Exactly.
Yes, we really did go out without parents, and we really came home when the street lights came on.
Right.
But and made our own foods. We were the latchkey generation. We
Yes.
fed our siblings.
Microwaves and
Yes,
yep.
which is exactly. But I situations. I'll tell you the hardest one was, of course, the first mom I had to do a reading, not a reading for, but a mediumship connection to the other side. The first mom who had just lost their child, having had that experience myself, that was probably the most challenging because I had to separate myself, and I'm also an empath. I could feel everything they're feeling. So I know what she's feeling from my own experience, and then I'm feeling her feelings, and I needed to get through that professionally without
Right.
sobbing like a baby. But um, there isn't uh, if they're coming to me for readings, it could be literally anything. They want to talk about their childhood. It's not always people think you come for readings to find out the future.
Right.
A lot of it, actually, and a large number of it is not. A large number of it is for them to come and learn how to cope with what we're dealing with now or overcome things that they're still carrying with them, stories and emotions and traumas from their childhood, which is also why I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, because sometimes a reading isn't enough, or
Okay.
sometimes Reiki isn't enough. Sometimes going into a regression and going back and experiencing it and looking at it from a new perspective is what helps you finally let it go. But whether it's talking to loved ones on the other side, true story, after my own child crossed the veil, I was on TikTok and all of a sudden I went live, but I didn't want to be associated with the readers on there because I found them limiting. We'll use that word. And I ended up doing reverse readings, meaning I would read the people here and send their message to those on the other side.
Okay.
I was picking from the people the things they were having a hard time saying and wanted to say to their brother or their husband or their spouse. So back when I was a kid, I would say I won't do anything having to do with criminal activity,
Right.
having been held up at gunpoint, having been my own Me Too moments, having been, it's like, I don't want to go there. And then one day I had to go there and they said, you're not allowed to say that anymore. And then it was, I don't want to do missing children. And then my best friend called me from Orlando and said, there's a missing child. And I said, I want to go there. And they said,
Right.
he's like, you're going to go there. And I did. And I told them where the missing child was. Um, Over the years, any kind of even limitation I self-imposed
Right.
has since been wiped away. So, because, and it's also why, and I have other healing modalities besides the one I've mentioned, because one tool doesn't fix all. There's a reason why there's a hammer and a wrench and a
Right.
pliers. one tool doesn't fit all. They could come to me because they need their house cleansed of spirit. They could come to me because they lost their wallet and they don't know where to find it. They come to me um, because they're not sure if they should move where they want to move to. Should they change jobs? Should they go back to school? So there is a lot of future stuff. Do I stay in this marriage? Do I stay in this abusive marriage or loveless marriage? What is the best plan? What are my options? If I stay with him, what does that look like? Or if I divorce her, what does that look like? There literally is no limit anymore to what people come to me for. I just know that if they're sitting in front of me, they're going to get the truth. They're
Right.
going to get no nonsense. There are a lot of people in my field, and back in the day, I did a lot of, I don't want to use the word fluff, but a lot of fill in um, because you don't know how to necessarily say something that might come off as negative.
Okay.
And so you find a way to work around it without saying, by the way, I sense, if someone had said to me, don't move because your child is going to be killed in this accident, I wouldn't have moved my ass.
Right.
But
Right.
we had to do what we had to do. So I never got that reading. I didn't ask. We felt this was what it was time for us to do, and we did it, and timing and this and that. But it's hard to say that. But I also, what, for someone who has that question, and I'm going to answer it, I've had people sit down and say, I don't want to know anything bad. There is no bad. It just is.
Okay.
It feels positive, or it could feel negative, like my own child being taken clearly is still horrific devastation for me. But at the same time, my child was tired. They were failure to thrive at birth. They struggled for 21 and a half years. They were non-binary. They had a father who didn't accept who they were. There was so much going on there that by 21 and a half, they were already tired,
Mm.
and beyond tired in a way that, though Gen Xers are most certainly tired,
Yes.
it was, between custody battles and things like that and traumas, it was more than they could handle. We were built tough.
Right. Yep.
We were built for tough,
Yes,
or
we
whatever
were.
it is. They are not. They're softer, and that's not a negative. It's actually,
Right.
I find it positive, that they're breaking through the molds that we were restricted under. And we were pretty wild,
Yeah.
but they're here to break the mold, and the millennials and the Gen Zers, and change things and sit at coffee shops without judgment and things like that. We were not taught that. You have to. But obviously to me it's traumatic, but to my child, they're at peace. To my child, they're breathing again. I get signs from my child all the time. I've had other readers come up to me and say, your child is doing great. You're they're so proud of you. And, you know, it isn't always about me.
Right.
To me, negative. Over when I do readings, I always ask for the highest good of all concerned. That means all.
Right.
So there is no bad. It just is.
Right. And then what you do with the information is up to you.
Exactly. And that's where those choices come in. When I moved to Atlanta from New Jersey, my first place doing a reading, a woman named Marilyn came in and sat down, and one of the first things that came out of my mouth, and that was channeled, was don't leave on Thursday for your appointment. Didn't even lay out cards yet, just don't leave on Thursday. She's like, well, I have to. I have an appointment, blah, blah, blah. I said, don't leave on Thursday for your appointment. That's all I could tell you. The rest is up to you. She
Yeah.
called me, and then I did her reading. She called me Thursday night. She said, thank you. She said, had I left for my appointment, everybody who knows Atlanta knows the traffic is
Right. Crazy. Yep.
awful. 285, 85, and 75 in and around the perimeter of Atlanta, awful. And she needed to take the perimeter. She needed to take 285 around. She said, had I left for my appointment, it was so foggy, there was a multi-car pileup. And had she left, she would have been in it. But she heeded my warning and she didn't leave and rescheduled her appointment. That's why people come for readings. To be foretold is to be forewarned, is to give you more options.
Right.
It wasn't her time to go.
Right.
which is why it popped out of my mouth before I could even lay out cards. And yes, these stories stick with me. That was 1994. That Marilyn was 1994, but it stays with you. And these people, they stay with you. True story, I was working at Universal Studios and I had a little girl from Ireland sit down and ask, they got a phone call from their neighbor, "Where's my hamster?" Unfortunately, I had to be the one to tell her that her hamster was under the dresser on
No
the other
longer breathing.
side, no longer breathing because it got out while the neighbors were taking care of them while they were here in the States to have a good vacation.
Oh
And
boy.
so I channeled the dead hamster.
Oh my goodness. And now what you needed to do was channel the neighbors to go get another hamster that
To
looked
look
just
just
like
like
that
right. But unfortunately, they weren't telepathic. It didn't matter how much. I'm like, dudes, go get another one. Don't make me tell this little kid to call you and say where it is. But they did call saying, I don't know where your hand. I mean, I love that they were honest,
one. Right.
but I hated that I had to be the one to tell them, by the way, squished like a grape.
Right, right. Wow.
But yeah, so and I lost track of our question. I apologize.
You're good. No, my next one was going to be without breaking any client confidentiality, could you share a general example of how a session has provided clarity or healing for someone? And you've got great examples. Is there any like profound one that sticks in your mind that kind of changed the course of somebody's life? Obviously, the one
Brenda.
in in Atlanta not being on that, whether she would have been in the pileup or not, the thing is she avoided it altogether. But is there any kind of profound, like you worked with them and it changed the course of their life? Maybe not. I'm just
Well, for
wondering.
me, that would be Brenda. At least
Okay.
Brenda's the first. There's been
Right,
many over the
right,
years. There's been many, many, many over the years. But for me, obviously, because that's when I started doing readings again after having taken off a couple of years because my first pastor told me it was a sin.
right.
Brenda, I changed the course of her life because I had to then go explain to both parents what was going on with her. And Brenda's mother didn't believe me at first either. She was that
Right.
kind of woman. Obviously, she'd put out her special needs pregnant child. She was that kind of woman. But that I had to go and explain everything to everybody. But even recently, I have, and I could share the story because people have seen her with me at events.
Okay.
She just moved to Florida. I have a regular client here. Her name is Pat. And Pat, if you watch this, I know you're going to laugh because yes, that's when you and I started talking, the phone rang.
Uh-huh.
Uh, that was Pat,
Was it
actually.
Pat?
That was Pat. She just moved to Florida. We met at the Litha Festival early in the spring, and she has been coming to me for readings since. She'll come out to wherever I was. If I was out in Callahan, she'd come out to Callahan. She'd come out to Woodland Park. It didn't matter where she was. And she would sit and she'd get the reading. And then she'd call me. She'd say, no. She'd say, you're wrong. She was like, you're wrong. No, no. Then she'd call me a couple of hours later, even 2 days later, and say, oh my God, you were so right. Oh my God, you were so right. Even right now that she's in Florida, she was originally wanting to move to Texas and then Florida. I said, not going to happen. And she didn't think she was going to have enough money. I said, you're going to have enough money. It's going to work out. And you're going to have an easy drive to Florida. And you're going to get to your brother because she was worried she was going to get there before he crossed. And she got there long before he crossed. He's still here. But she will literally call me and say, oh, well, and she wanted to go stay with her grandchild in Texas. And I said to her, I said, he wants you there, but he can't. But he can't tell you that. So sure enough, she ended up a conversation with him as she was driving through Texas. She called him and they're talking as she's driving across the country. And she called me up. He said, you're right again. He said, as it turns out, he wanted me to live there, but his girlfriend is pregnant again, and the room I was supposed to stay in is now the nursery, and I can't come. So she's like, I don't know how you do it, but you were right again. And this is all you know, Pat, if you see this, if you're watching this, comment below. She is so right because that is what she has said to my friend Mindy, to my friend Heather, who she's met, because we've all done lunch together,
Right.
because she ended up becoming not just client, but friend,
Right.
because that's always going to be her response is that, you know, all right, give me more.
Right.
I mean, she's already called me from Florida and she's only been there a week. So,
Right. Right.
does it change but yes, she was planning on all sorts of different things, but through our readings, we came up with a different map of how it's supposed to look.
Right.
And that changed her plans, even for the fact that she wanted to leave in the spring but I said, you'll be out of here, before November. And they packed up her stuff October 31st.
Wow.
So yeah, it's little things like that. Some of it's right on sometimes. And you know what? Here's what I'm going to tell you. For people who want to discuss accuracy, you know what? Engineers make mistakes. Mechanics make mistakes. There is nobody on this earth that is going to be 100% accurate 100% of the time
Right.
because we're human. We misperceive, we misread. Is my accuracy pretty darn good? Oh yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I've got good reviews and good people following me and whatnot. I've got a good reputation over the years. But just when you go to somebody and if they read you and they don't read you accurately, go to somebody else. It
Okay.
just might mean they're not on your vibe, or they might be picking up a different side that you're not familiar with yet.
Huh.
It could be something that even hasn't entered your conscious mind yet. So, but always, 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 always trust your own intuition when deciding who you should get a reading from.
Oh, true. Yep. And now I'm gonna kind of
Just pivot.
throw throw something at you that is a little bit unconventional. So, how does your guidance and the guidance that you offer differ, say, from traditional therapy or life coaching? Do you ever work in tandem with those professionals?
Oh yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah. I've worked in tandem, not so far here in the Springs because people don't know I'm here yet. I've mostly been working at pop-up and vendor events just so, I moved here from homelessness, so I didn't have any capital to start up with. So I started working at Saltville Dissension Center at a mystical Sunday fair. And that's kind of where I've been doing Body, Mind, Spirit Expo just for the exposure so people could get to know me.
right.
But in Atlanta, as a Reiki master, I would work in tandem with massage therapists. And as a minister, I could work with counselors. As a hypnotherapist, I have worked with counselors. Um, to me, again, one tool doesn't fit all. I have recommended a lot of straight hardcore counseling to a lot of my clients that have sat in front of me simply because what they were dealing with was if they couldn't afford the hypnotherapy or this or that and they had insurance that would cover because I don't accept insurance. I'm not going with that stuff.
Right.
Um, um, Sometimes they actually needed more than I could assist them with. And I have not arrived. I don't have all the answers. I have the answers
No.
I'm supposed to give you. I have the answers I am supposed to give you. I do not filter them. That's also part of my prayer, not just for the highest good of all concerned or the most divine, accurate information, but that to remove my ego and see to it, it doesn't interfere with or transfer into the information I'm receiving or giving. I always want to be sure I'm coming from light, from the universe's blessings. And I don't have all the answers, but I've had them send them to me sometimes for spiritual counseling or ministerial counseling because I do, being an interfaith minister and having not just studied but walked in many of the spiritual paths in my own life. And having lived in different experiences, I have things that I could help people with
Right.
that people who just, let's say, have book knowledge might not be able to assist with.
Right.
They might not, or like I never recommend women who have had Me Too moments going to someone who only has book knowledge.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I always recommend they find someone who has had their own experiences or someone in their family, someone who knows what it's like to live with that kind of experience, or a military member who is walking with PTSD. If they've had zero, if they're going to a counselor who has zero knowledge or experience having to do with military life,
Right.
they're not going to be able to advise you
Right.
in a way I think is most conducive.
Okay.
So yes, I do work in tandem with, by the way, if there's somebody out there who wants to work in tandem with me, I'm open,
Right.
uh, here in the Springs. But yeah, no, I think it's important that we utilize every tool. And if you're comfortable with church and your pastor, then go to church. If you're comfortable with synagogue, with your mosque, with your nippy ceremony at a Native American uh, ground, do what makes you comfortable. Trust that part of you, that higher spirit part of you that says, this is where I belong. What's interesting is for me, I belong all of it.
Right.
You know, sometimes I need to chant in Sanskrit, and sometimes I need to chant in Hebrew, and sometimes I need to chant in Shine, Jesus, Shine. I mean, whatever is flowing out of me, I run with it. That's what I would like for all of you is trust that higher spirit, that voice inside your head that speaks, and then you go back later and say, why didn't I listen?
Right. Right.
So, but
Okay.
yes,
Great. That's good knowledge. I thought I was going to trip you up on that one, but I love that you have already had experiences with that, and that as this whole interview is gone, you're open to it, and you've worked with them. So, as you know, there can be a lot of skepticism and negativity, negative stereotypes in your field. And in your experience, what is the biggest or a few of the misconceptions, misunderstandings that people have about the work you do?
okay. Well, first of all, the first one's the one I already answered before, which is there is no right or wrong.
Right.
Okay, that's the first and foremost. Oh, well, you're wrong. No, you just don't know what's coming down the pike yet. And don't get me wrong, I could be wrong.
Right.
I could be wrong. There could be something that I am misperceiving, part of me as I straighten backwards. Um, I'm not 100% right. Misperceptions is um, they are already shut down. So I might be reading something, for example, I might be picking up on something and picking up, and it's strong, and there it is. And they're going, no, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. But I said, do you want me to stop? No, I'll keep going. It's not them, it's their daughter or their son or their spouse or their twin on the other side of the veil. Sometimes what we pick up on isn't always exactly clear right away. So I might be describing a person, a place, a thing. It might be something that they blocked out from childhood. But as we're doing the readings, they have this aha, this look like, oh my God, I got it. Oh my God, you're right. You were talking about so and so. That's what we're talking about. And so, right or wrong, you mispicking things up inaccurately. Sometimes you just have to get the reading, go home, and sit on it and listen and wait and see how things unfold, which is Pat's biggest lesson is watching things unfold.
Right.
Another misperception is, oh, when I got here, all people thought I wanted to know was about my child on the other side. I had people, first of all, here's where I want to be fair. We're not all good at what we do,
Right.
and we're not all honest,
Yep.
and we're not all truthful. And there are a lot of, I don't want to use the word fakes because truthfully, we all have the ability to do this. So technically, there is no fake, but there are a
Right.
lot of people who pretend
Right.
that when they don't really have the skills to
Right.
do what they claim to be doing. Let's put it
Right.
that way. And that's part of what makes us look bad.
Right.
Part of what ruins it for our profession, and this is a profession. I always laugh and say they call it a medical practice, but I'm a professional psychic. Okay. They're still practicing. We
Right.
got it down.
Right.
Okay. You know, we don't say psychic practice, we're professional psychics. Um, aren't, but um, we're not all good at what we do, or we're not all good for each other.
Right.
Someone might be good for someone else, and it's just not the right person for me, which is why I advised earlier, don't give up just because this one wasn't in your blood veins.
Right.
Go look for another one, give somebody else a choice. And yes, by the way, if you feel like they're a fake, go with that too.
Right.
Trust that intuition. Um, Misperceptions that we're out here to scam people,
Okay.
that we're here. I'm not. I know there are plenty. I've known plenty over the years. Having started this work in New Jersey, I knew a lot of gypsies in Trenton that didn't always have the best ethical standards.
Yeah.
But for me, at least, I actually have my ethics posted on my business page. My kids know that when I'm buried, I wanted to say she was a woman of integrity on her tombstone.
Right.
Uh, I, but no, we aren't all full of integrity, but just because you met a bad one doesn't mean the rest of us are.
Right.
Give us a chance.
Yep. That leads to an important point. There are charlatans out there in general.
Mhm.
I don't know what word, but that's the word that comes to mind.
I love
Not
that word.
not everybody has the best intentions in any profession. It doesn't matter. But
Exactly.
this one does have a lot of um, connotation
Snake
and
oil
skepticism.
salesman.
Yes. So, for those who might be curious but also cautious, what advice would you give them on how to find a reputable, ethical practitioner like yourself and to avoid the scams that are out there? Because they are.
Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is do the same thing when you apply for a job. What's the boss do? He looks at your references. Well, if they're smart, they'll look at your references. Ask for references.
Okay.
Ask if there are people. Like I said, once you post this, I'm going to have Pat watch it, read your newsletter, and I'm going to ask her to comment. Although she has actually already left a review on my Facebook business page,
Right.
but don't be afraid to say, can you give it? Because even though, yes, we need to maintain confidentiality, at least I do,
Right.
because I'm also an interfaith minister. Not only am I know a lot of readers that will share stories um, and don't keep secrets. For
Okay.
me, because I'm also a minister, it's, these stories that I'm telling, I know you're never going to know who Brenda is,
Right.
and that was from the 90s, you know
Right.
what I mean? And Pat has already posted publicly, so I could
Right.
say, Pat, we joke about all the time. She tells me I'm wrong. She waits. She calls me back and says, you were right again. This is not private. She has said this to my friends and everything.
Right.
Ask for references, look at reviews. I know a lot of people, there are spiritual groups on Facebook, like the Essential Wellness Society, and I forget spiritual something. I'd have to bring them up. There's the 411 group.
Right.
People will ask in there. But here's what I'm going to say is don't always listen to what you're seeing posted either,
Right.
because there is a lot of nepotism, a lot of favoritism, a lot of people who will say so and so is good, but that's because they're their best friend, not
Right.
necessarily because they are good at what they do. But in certain cases, like myself, I actually have um, a certification from the American Association of Professional Psychics and my hypnotherapy. So if we're talking about people that are Reiki masters, hypnotherapists, don't be afraid to say, can I see your certification?
Credentials. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see your credentials. Can you send me a review or two, or is there somebody I could call to get a reference on what you're doing? if we're ethical, we have no problem with saying, yes, let me check with so and so and make sure, and I will give you a contact, or go to my Facebook page and look at this review, or see how the response is at like Body Mind Spirit Expo or
Right.
whatnot. One of my reviews on Facebook is actually from the showrunner from the Oddity and Curiosity expos that go on here. They have 3 every year.
Right.
And the showrunner of those, Tiffany, she was one of the first people to leave a review on my Facebook page. And she was like, if you're having an event, you want Laurel there. You
Right.
know, you want people that say like that they themselves are verifiable. You know, Tiffany is clearly the person who runs these shows.
Right.
So she's clearly not going to put it out and pretend to be, the owner of Starbucks. You
Right.
know, look at who's giving the reference, look at the references, don't be afraid. And the other thing is I want to say from the very beginning is trust your gut.
Right.
I actually gave a talk on intuition at the Body Mind Spirit Expo. And the best tool you have, call it your sixth sense, call it your intuition, call it your gut. I don't care which word you use. We all have it. We all have the ability to hear it. Most of us turn it off or think we have to ask everybody else for advice.
Right.
Ask your friends, should I ask this person for reading as you're walking around the expo? Don't listen to what your friend says. Trust yourself. And here's the thing, you might be taken, but there's a lesson in that too. I have.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
I've been scammed. My first husband and I were scammed and left homeless by a phony CIA recruiter, believe it or not. He was
Wow.
Navy and whatnot. You know what? It happens, but it's just another lesson. And we want those lessons. Again, your mind only works if it's open, but what keeps it open is keeping to learn and grow and have all these life lessons that walk us through. And yes, most of them are not pleasant,
Right. Right.
but some of them are.
Right.
But some of them are. I won a trip to Scotland simply
Okay.
by entering a competition, scavenger hunt. And I didn't win the scavenger hunt, but 1 year later, that was only a weekend in Scotland. 1 year later, I won an 8-day trip to Scotland because I knew I was winning that trip to Scotland.
Wow.
Just trust yourself, and yeah, I will send you that link, by the way, to the link to the commercial the Atlanta CW did for us when we won the trip, so you could see it and
Okay.
laugh at me and my older child when we won. But yeah, trust, and ask. What is
Right.
the question? Trust, but um,
Verified.
verify.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. I kind of live by that too, but I am very trusting in general. So
Me
it's
too.
I'll trust you until you prove me wrong kind of thing. So I flop between the two.
Right, exactly. Well, that's me. You know what? Everyone says you're a psychic. How did that happen to you? Well,
Yep.
first of all, I don't read for myself because my ego's involved. So there's a really good question, by the way, that people have asked me in the past. I can read for myself, but if we could get false answers, if we want something strong enough, we could get a false yes. Or if we want it so strong enough, but we don't think we're going to get it, we could get a false no when it really is a yes. So like I said earlier, I work really hard to remove my ego from any of the information. And when you ask, where's the information coming from? God, angels, spirit guides, animal guides, our loved ones that have crossed over the veil, pets that have crossed over the veil, if you happen to believe in other things outside of this earthly realm, um, the answers come from all the above, and they come from you. When
Right.
I'm tuning into your higher energy, your higher power. But trust all of it. I believe in trusting first and then verifying. I look to see the best in everybody,
Right.
even the people that rumored or not. I don't listen to gossip. I refuse. I've had people tell me to stay away from someone. That's their experience with them. It doesn't mean it's going to be mine.
Right.
And I don't believe we should judge anybody ever. Period. That's what it says. Judge not lest you be judged. So why judge? But don't judge me either.
Right. Right. I love that. Um, lots of life lessons in there on top of trusting yourself, which I think could be a Gen X thing. And it might be just society that trusting yourself was not something we grew up with.
No, it's not. We were
We
not
were
taught.
told what to do, what life was going to look like, what we're supposed to do, what stages, and what's going to happen. And it was,
It
and then
didn't
when
work
it,
out that way.
yeah, when it didn't, it was like, wait a second. So I like that you
It's
have
actually
that in.
It's actually really funny now looking back, but in 2009, I head back to New Jersey to go to my cousin's wedding, and I went to my old synagogue and I went to visit my old rabbi. And after he immediately noticed me in the congregation and he brought me back to his office when it was done. And I spent the next half hour yelling at him.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, you did not. I said, you were supposed to be our spiritual teacher, and you did not tell me it was going to look like this. You didn't say, you did not tell me, you did not warn us.
Right.
And he actually said, you're right. He said, I could have done a better job. He said, but I'm going to take what you're saying and I'm going to use it moving forward.
Right.
So, and then of course we got to the good stuff and we got over my grief moment and this and that. And true story, I also had pneumonia at the time, but I didn't know it yet. I found out like 5 days later I had pneumonia. So I wasn't feeling well.
Right.
But yeah, it doesn't work out the way we think it's going to. But if you know how to use the tools and if you know how to use the law of attraction, and if you know how to use, and I don't want to use a word, but utilize
Mhm.
the people that are there before you, readers and healers and Reiki masters and massage therapists and chiropractors, you could draw to you. Like I did the Scotland trip, you can draw to you the life that you want,
Right.
but you actually have to have the faith to believe it.
Yep. I know the whole law of attraction. I'm for it. I just don't think I have that strong enough belief in it
Faith.
to draw to, whatever it is. I think so,
But
it's
here's what's interesting though is you're already drawing it to you. For example, let's talk about even, and not to get political, but let's just what happened in terms of the shutdown. Everybody kept on talking about the shutdown, so it kept on going and going and going and going and going. I watched that happen with the drought in Atlanta when I lived there. We had a horrible drought. I mean, Lake Lanier was the lowest it had ever been, and it was getting terrifying. But this is all everybody talked about. So the longer we talked about, the drought happened. But then all of a sudden, gas prices started going up, and this is when they went up to over $4 or $5, and we
right.
had the gas lines like we did back in the 70s
Yep.
during the crisis. But they were now talking about gas, and gas kept going higher and higher and higher, but the drought ended.
Oh, right. Okay.
But the drought ended
Yep.
because what we were all collectively focusing on shifted.
Right.
So we have the capabilities. People will sit there and talk about dis-ease, right?
Right.
Because that's all it is. I don't care what you call it. And I know that I've already had a full hysterectomy for ovarian cancer, and a lot of Gen Xers I know are dealing with a lot of physical things that our parents and grandparents didn't deal with. Um, but it's really dis-ease. Dis means out of. It's our bodies being out of ease. But what
Right.
they do is they sit there and they talk about it and they own it. They like you'll see on commercials, my prostate cancer. I'm using one
Right.
that I can't get.
Right.
And I'm taking this for my prostate. Don't have one, I could use it, cancel. But you'll also hear me cancel it out just in case, because I
Right.
wouldn't wash it on anybody.
Right.
Don't own it. The more you focus on it, call it just I have never said it. If I have to talk about something, like you and I were talking about earlier about my foot, I
Right.
will say I was diagnosed with.
Right.
But
Right.
not mine. So the law of attraction is working. If you're worried about bills, guess what happens? More show up, money runs short. If you start saying, I have everything I need, or even better yet, I'm grateful for
Right.
everything I have, and you start focusing on the gratitude, that's from where the rest of the blessings come.
Right.
I have on my floor mats, I moved here, I told you, from homelessness, yet my floor mats say thankful, grateful, blessed.
Right.
And every day before I eat, I say gratitude. I say grace even before feeding my dog. He has his own grace because
Okay.
he's eating meat and he's blessed that he has food. And when you focus on the good, the law of attraction starts to kick in. True story. I don't know if you know anything about diabetes.
I do.
I was diagnosed in 2021. 1 year ago, September 5th, my A1C, an average A1C, a good A1C is anything under 6, really, 5.5 to 6, even 6.5. After that, it's pre-diabetic, then after 7, diabetes. 1 year ago, on September 5th, I had blood work done, September 5th, 24, and my A1C was 11.1. They were
Wow.
surprised I wasn't in the hospital.
Right.
But I didn't know any better. Uh, but I was admitted into the hospital in September for my foot. September 25th, 1 year and 1 month. I was admitted into the hospital. My A1C is 7.7.
Okay.
In 1 year, most people, it takes years and 600 drugs, the
Right.
Mounjaros and this. I don't take them. Now, I
Right.
do take metformin because of polycystic ovary syndrome. I
Right.
was put on that in 2001 for PCOS, having nothing to do. But my A1C, why? Because every day I say I'm so happy and grateful my body has been restored to my natural birthright of perfect health. Because that's what we're told we're supposed to have, perfect health. We're
Right.
born perfect. I don't agree with where they say you were born a sinner. We were born perfect. It's only what we're programmed with, trained with, indoctrinated with, taught that changes that thinking. We are actually born naturally intuitive. We're up until 5, 6, 7, you're in the alpha state, directly connected to God's source. And you're beautiful and you're perfect. And anything that happens after that is solely because of teaching.
Right.
So let's teach each other. Let me teach you that you're perfect and
Right.
you're beautiful just as you are.
Right.
That's how you were born, and you still are that way.
I love that message. So
You know,
then, what are the things that people could come to you for? What other services specifically that you offer? And how can people find out more information and connect with you?
okay. Well, first of all, conscious channeled psychic readings. That's not what I do, it's who I am. I was born this way. As I have it in writing from my mom, she knew when I couldn't say bubby, I said bubbly. How old are you
Right.
with 1.5, 2 years old when you can't say bubby and you're still saying bubbly? That's how old I was when I found out I was a psychic. And so that that helps me stay alive. That's like my connection to all that's divine. Um, but um, you could come to literally for other things related to being a psychic. I do numerology charts. For example, I'm getting a new license plate. Well, every letter has a numerical vibration. Everything in this earth, computers, everything is numerical vibration.
Right.
The solfeggio tones, and we all vibrate. The earth vibrates at 432 megahertz, or not mega, but hertz.
Right.
And, everything is numbers. So use those numbers. You want to name a business. Let's do the numbers, find out if it's a good vibration, if it's going to be a successful business. You want to move, get your numbers done, find out if the address is a positive one. I actually chose my phone number back in the day. I've had this phone number since 2001, but before there was a shortage, I
Right.
chose my own cell phone number back from Sprint, out of a choice of four. A numerology, come to me for Reiki, which is energy healing, or is discussed earlier, laying on of hands, as it's discussed biblically, the gift of healing. Um, they could come to me for spiritual or religious counseling. They could come to me if they want an officiant for a ceremony, whether it's a wedding or a funeral or a baby naming. As an interfaith minister, I will happily help you with that. Come to me for hypnotherapy or regression therapy if you're struggling. if you're hurting, if you have any kind of post-traumatic stress, whether it's from childhood or last week, whether it's from a Me Too moment or for being in war, hypnotherapy really does work. Or if you want to drop weight, if you want to quit smoking, if you want to de-stress, hypnotherapy, I'm not allowed to use the word clinical in Colorado because there is an actual clinical board, and I have not taken the test yet to get on it, simply because of some memory issues from the accident I was in that brought me here.
Right.
But I am certified as a clinical transpersonal hypnotherapist. And so that's where my experience is. I don't do it. It's not stage hypnosis.
Right.
It's you give me your history and we go over and we look at the patterns and whatnot, and then we regress you to where it is that we could fix the issue. And sometimes 1 or 2 sessions is all you need, and sometimes it requires more. Just depends on what you're coming to me for.
Right.
What else can you come to me for? Friendship. If you need a hug, there are a lot of people out there. If you're the word, most people don't know this word, but I'm going to introduce it here. It's veloma. If you're a parent who lost your child, whose child is on the other side of the veil, and you need someone who knows what that feels like, you're not alone. You could come talk to me. That's no charge. That is just two parents sharing about their children, and I'm happy to be there for you. Come to me if you want psychic parties. I did a psychic party for 5 women last month. I also do seminars and corporate events, speaking, um, power and battery, energy versus sign. I got. How do we pause this? Is there a way to pause this so I could get my cord? Because apparently my computer's going to die. Okay, so I was telling you I do corporate events and keynote speaking. I teach. So whatever it is, honestly, my favorite thing to do is psychic parties, bring me in for New Year's, and do readings for everybody or Christmas or whatever. And you could also get gift certificates for every one of them. How do you reach me? 678-895-7448 is my phone number. It is an Atlanta number, and I've had it since 2001, and I'm not changing it.
Right.
And this
It's
way,
got the numerology. You have to keep it.
I have to keep it. Plus, it also, because I've had it all these years, true story. I've 20 years after I did a reading for someone in Atlanta, they called me from Florida, thrilled that they still had my phone number. There's something to be said about consistency so that old clients could still find you no matter where you are in the world.
Right.
But pardon me, my website is simple, crystalvision.info. crystalvision.info. Why? I'm a psychic. I give information. And truthfully, I've had that since 2002, 2004, and it kind of stuck. Or you can find me on Facebook. On Facebook, on the top of the page, it will say Crystal Vision, but it's actually facebook.com/Laurel Phoenix CHT. LAURELPHOENIXCHT for clinical hypnotherapist. That's it, facebook.com/Laurel Phoenix CHT. Those
Okay.
are the 3 best ways. I have an Insta, I don't use it. I
Right.
am on TikTok under Matrix Gypsy, but that's really for those who want to know my story on what brought me here.
Right.
I started vlogging after the accident that took my child, and that's really what my TikTok is about. And every now and then I do go live and offer free cross reverse readings, but it's been a while since I've done that. But I'm going to do it again soon. Everybody keeps yelling at me that I should be going live. So
So basically, it's the phone number and website and Facebook, and I'm sure they can get your email address
I
off
was
the
going to
website.
say, I forgot my email. My email is money flows in. Money flows in at crystalvision.info. Because where do
Okay.
I want the money going?
And
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
So
and that's funny. Someone corrected me on that. My original email was just money flows. And someone said, which way do you want it flowing? I said, oh, yeah, money flows in at crystalvision.info. I don't want it going that way. Money
right,
flows in.
right.
So
Oh, that's funny. So finally, why Colorado Springs? What drew you to build your practice here, and what do you find unique about the community in, in our city? Now, I know you were on a different path and going somewhere else, but because of everything that happened, you could have chosen anywhere else. You did wind up in Colorado Springs, so that's kind of where, why.
that's an interesting, yes, yeah, we were on our way somewhere else, and it was a mutual decision to do that someplace else, and I couldn't go there without my child. Um, What's interesting though is I didn't realize it, but when I started looking into Colorado Springs while I was homeless in Atlanta, renting rooms after the accident. And I started looking at places. First of all, I wanted, you're going to laugh, part of it was political. I wanted a blue state. Having lived in the southern red states since 1994, had enough. Not necessarily the South, but most certainly of the red.
Right.
And I wanted to be in a state that was a lot more open-minded,
Right.
which gave me a narrow selection. I
Okay.
could have done the Northeast, which is where I'm from, but one, too expensive. Two,
Yes.
you really can't ever go home again. You know, you could
True.
visit, but you can't really go backwards. Um, so part of it was um, limited scope. That gave me really a choice of what here, Colorado in general, California, Oregon, Washington, which was high up on my possibilities because I have cousins in Vancouver, Canada, and I thought about Vancouver, Washington, so I could
Right.
cross the border to see them because I was minus a child and alone. And I thought being near cousins I love would be helpful. But I also didn't want the gloom and I didn't want the gray. And part of what drew me here was the reputation of 300 days of sunshine.
Right.
You know, I mean, I knew Denver, and I thought about Denver, but Denver too north, too cold. Um, the irony is the last time I'd even been in Colorado was 1998, helping a friend move from New Jersey to Bakersfield, California.
Oh,
But that was my last trip to Colorado before the day I arrived here.
okay.
Although the funniest part is, of course, I got here. My son drove me here. We went to Garden of the Gods that first weekend, and I said, okay, let's do some, because he needed to get back to college in Georgia. I said, we backed into the spot because I only back in,
Yes.
and it started hailing
Right.
and it hailed for an hour.
Yep.
And so we drove away. And that was it. And I've never made it back to Garden of the
Oh
Gods.
my goodness.
But what drew me here, first of all, was reputation because I needed to heal.
Right.
And I'm actually surprised that there's a lot less recycling here than there is in Atlanta and in Georgia in general. I thought there would be a lot more considering what an outdoor environmental state this is.
Right.
But a large part of it was I need to heal. I need to rehab my body, which I'm still working on. I had 3 surgeries this past summer, so it's been a lot slower progress
Right.
physically than I thought it would be. But part of it was I wanted Pikes Peak. I
Right.
want um it's November and it was 73 degrees today. And yet I know tomorrow, cancel, I hope not, but I know it's gonna be 25, you
This is
know.
this is very, very
I
unusual.
know I've here, this is my gonna be my third winter here, so I know it. But I like this a lot more than the fact that last year it snowed on Halloween.
Right.
But I like that. I like that I, for the first time in my life, 3 nights ago, I got to see the auroras.
I know, wasn't that magical?
I remember last year people in Denver talking about them, but they made it all the way down here.
Yep, and it's the
And
first time in my life I've ever seen them.
mine too. And I've traveled and I've done things, and it was just breathtaking to look in
Yes.
the sky and see it not black or blue
Yep.
and with white specks, But what brought me here was I thought, well, and part of it is, if I live on the east side, never anybody told me to move to the west side to Manitou and OCC and things like that. And I've actually done a lot of work in
Right.
Old Colorado City. I commute a lot to Old Colorado City, but I didn't want to be living near what's familiar to me. I liked
Oh,
seeing and
huh.
experiencing new. And I'm surprised that this town is more conservative than I thought it would be based on reputation, but it's also diverse. And first of all, there's a lot of Californians here, which I know really piss off the locals, but I actually really, really love it because we resonate. But
Right.
what
Well,
brought
we have
me
a
here,
lot of military, so there's a lot of transient, coming
which
in.
I love because I'm a Navy ex-wife and I'm an Air Force mom and I'm a Navy sister and a Navy niece and an Army niece and a Navy cousin and a Navy aunt,
Right.
and the list goes on. So oh my God, that actually had a lot to do with it because when I lived in Arizona, I lived near the base. When I lived in Georgia, I lived directly across the street from the base, directly across the street. I lived near Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force Base, and I've always been, I'm very comfortable as a Navy ex-wife and an Air Force mom being around the military.
Yeah.
And I actually want to help a lot of
Right.
the military because so much of them are dealing with so much. Oh, which by the way, I do want to mention when you asked, I have a permit for private services, meaning not parties or corporate or group events. But if someone comes to me one-on-one for a reading, Reiki, hypnotherapy, whatever, um, I give a permanent 20% discount for everybody who's a military first responder, honorable discharged or active duty, teachers and students with proof of any and all the above. Bring
Okay.
me your DD 214, bring me your valid ID, bring me your teacher's ID or your student ID. That is off of private events. That's a permanent 20% discount because we need to help them. They're
Right.
struggling and underrespected and underpaid. And so that's I used to work in a volunteer fire department. My older brother was Navy, but my younger was volunteer fireman, as was my father. We have to help where we can.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, no, I love the transients
Okay.
because I myself am a wandering
Right.
Jew. You know,
Right.
I myself have lived everywhere, so I love it.
So it was just time. Colorado Springs, it was just the time.
It was just yeah, so I started to say when I was looking through stuff, I went to bookmark sites to find that they were already bookmarked on my computer and nobody used my computer. And then I actually remembered my ex walked out in 2004. We were officially divorced for the second time, don't ask, in 2007. But I remember before I knew he was going to kidnap him and we were going to get stuck in Atlanta, I actually was looking at coming here back then and I didn't
Okay.
even remember that.
Right. Right.
Something about maybe it was John Denver. I
Yeah.
don't know, but something about Colorado just felt exotic to me.
Okay.
I've lived near mountains. My sweat lodge, my Nippy ceremony home was in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We used to go to the Catskills and the Poconos, and I've always been near mountains and would visit mountains, but I've actually never lived in the mountains.
Right.
And so this was new and exciting, and it's 2 years and I'm still trying to breathe.
Right. Right.
Still
Takes a bit.
acclimating.
Yeah. Well, you had other medical things, so I think your body's just needs to heal
Yeah,
well and then acclimate.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm doing pretty good though. I'm
Yeah.
doing pretty good.
Yes.
I've done work, I worked at Woodland Park Pride, and I worked down in Pueblo. There, that it's I'm doing okay. I get around, and I don't mean it that way.
We're not going to spread rumors here.
Have car
Okay.
will travel.
There you go.
Have broom will travel. Kidding, kidding. Uh,
Well, okay, Laurel. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your work with me today. It's
oh, the
been
pleasure's been all mine.
it's been truly fascinating and eye-opening, and I'm so grateful for that. So, no matter where you stand on spiritual matters, anyone who's listening, I hope today's discussion has been enlightening and shown you another facet of the diverse businesses that make Colorado Springs special. I believe every business owner has a story worth telling, and Laurel's is a powerful reminder of that. If
Thank
you
you.
if you'd like to learn more about Laurel Phoenix and Crystal Vision, and true story, I keep thinking that your name is Crystal. It's not.
Oh,
I'm
that's
like, it's
funny.
Laurel. It's
You're not the only person to say
okay.
that to me. You're
Okay.
not the only person to call me Crystal.
Okay.
But then again, true story, these are my bracelets, and
Right.
I these never come off except for hospital stays.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
never I'm never far from crystals.
Okay.
So it's
So
fair.
So again, if you'd like to learn more about Laurel Phoenix and Crystal Vision, you can find her online at crystalvision.info. That's CrystalVision dot info. Or connect with her on Facebook. And she's already let you know what her Facebook was, but facebook.com/ Laurel Phoenix CHT. And she'd love to see you there. And then if you want to stay in the know about more amazing stories like this one, subscribe to Colorado Springs Town Tidings at cos.towntidings.com. I'm Sandy Zuniga, celebrating our city one business at a time, and I'll see you next time. Bye,
Thank
Laurel.
you. Bye, Sandy. Thank you for having me here.
Our pleasure.